A young family had just moved into a new home. They were renting the upstairs part of the house, the flat. They had known the owners of the house that lived downstairs with their two boys for a couple of years. They were having some financial difficulties, so they decided to move out and get a smaller place, something they could afford. So they moved in. A couple of days later, one of the neighbors came by and she gave the wife a dozen roses. And of course, she was very happy about that, so she got them, put them inside, quickly put them in water in a vase, and she set the vase up in her bedroom, on top of the dresser there. So later on that night, her husband and her wanted to go out for a walk and just, get some fresh air. So they walked out of the house, went down the road, walked away for maybe, 10, 15 minutes. And then suddenly the wife stopped and said, I have this weird feeling. She goes, I don't feel very well. And the husband said, Are you pregnant? She says, no. He goes, I just have this weird feeling and, I'm just feeling kind of off. I said, okay. So let's just walk back to the house. So they walked back to the house, and in the door, up the stairs, the other family wasn't home at this time. And so they went upstairs, and she went to the bedroom to change. And she noticed that one of the roses was on top of the bed. And she said to her husband, did you place them there? He's like, nope. He says, maybe you left it there and you forgot to put it in the vase. She goes, no. She says, I put all 12 of them in there. She goes, someone's been up here. The husband said, that's impossible. Says, no one's been home all day. When you left the bedroom, did you notice it on the bed? She goes, no. She goes, someone's come in here and put that rose on the bed. She goes, I'm really creeped out right now. So they both walked around, checked the rooms, made sure nobody was there. They went downstairs, called out for the landlords, and of course they weren't home. So they just figured, okay, well, that's just a weird coincidence. We'll ask them when they get home. So they went out and sat in the backyard and had a couple of drinks and just enjoyed the evening. And eventually the landlords came by and they asked him, they said, something really weird happened a couple of hours ago. Said, went out for a walk, and when we returned, there was a rose on the bed. And the landlords looked at each other and they were kind of shocked. And she says, does that sound like something that happens around here? Or did someone, someone trying to play a joke on us? And the wife said, no. She says, that's really odd. She goes, where was the flower exactly? And she says, well, the rose was just right on the middle of the bed between the pillows. She goes, oh, okay. She goes, yeah, that is very strange though. She goes, well, nobody's been home and the boys were with them. She thought, I don't know what to tell you. So anyway, they talked for a little bit, and eventually the new tenants went upstairs and they were getting ready for bed. And the husband was sitting on the edge of the mattress there, and suddenly felt as if he was being watched, and kind of glanced over his shoulder really quick and said he thought he saw like a shadow just kind of, just run by him. So he thought that was kind of weird. Maybe it was just his eyes playing tricks on him. So anyway, they got ready for bed and they were just talking. And all of a sudden they heard just above them, like on the ceiling, not in the attic, but like just right on their ceiling inside their room, they heard kind of a scratching sound. And right away the wife thought, oh great, there's mice here. He goes, well, it is an older home, that's quite possible, but he says, that's kind of odd though. He says, it doesn't sound like mice, it sounds like an actual scratch. Like almost like when you run your fingers through a chalkboard, but without the high-pitched sound. So anyway, they listened to it for a bit, and eventually it did go away. So they ended up going to sleep and got up in the morning, and First thing the wife did was look over at the vase, and all the flowers are there, all 12 of them. So the husband asked her, he says, who exactly gave them to you? Was it so-and-so? She said, yeah. She goes, and I've known them for a little while, so that they're okay. I can't think of anything weird, trying to put a connection here. But anyway, they went to work and dropped the little boy off at the daycare, and later on in the afternoon, they came home and, started making supper. And again, the wife was in the kitchen, and she says she swore that she saw a shadow go by. That's probably the worst feeling to have is you're home, and then suddenly, you're doing something, and you feel like you're being watched, or you see something kind of just zoom right by you. You get that uneasy feeling, and then, as you're doing your dishes or prepping your food, you're constantly looking over your shoulder because you feel like something's there. So this went on for a little bit. They had supper. They talked about their day and whatnot, and the wife mentioned that, and he said, the other day I had that same feeling. He says, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, and I suddenly felt like someone just ran by me. He goes, it was so odd, though. She said, yeah. She goes, I wonder if there's any ghosts here, or did someone die in this house? That's really strange. So days went by, and of course Sunday came, and they were church people, so they got ready for church, went to church in the morning for their 10 a.m. mass. And then when they came back, the wife walks into the bedroom. There's a rose on the bed, but this time the rose has been cut at the stem. It's been snapped in half. So she takes the rose, she goes downstairs. The family's not inside, they're actually in the back, in their backyard. And she walks over, she goes, look, I don't know what's going on, and shows them the rose and says, while we were in church, someone cut this rose and placed it on our bed. And the wife just had the look of horror in her face, and she looked at her husband. And they looked at each other and said, look, we didn't go up there, and, we respect your privacy. You pay your rent, so there's no reason for us to go up there for anything. But, that's really odd, and we did not do that. So the wife's trying to think, why would they do this to me? So she's starting to get suspicious and whatnot, so she just walks away, storms out of there, goes upstairs, changes, and starts preparing for lunch. So the landlord, after her lunch, went upstairs and said, look, I need to speak with you. Why don't you come down, we'll have some tea and we'll talk. So she came down. They're sitting in their living room, and the lady says to her, said, we're kind of freaked out about what's gone on the last little while with your flowers. But I do have to tell you something. She said, when we first bought this house, we heard a lot of strange things, a lot of scratching sounds. My husband saw a lot of shadows. Because I just had a lot of, strange, uneasy feelings in this house. She said that a couple of tenants before you had a similar problem. But instead of the flowers, what would happen is they would come home from going out to church or on a family trip or just for a walk. They'd come back, and the wife would find scissors or cutlery, like a knife, a fork, a spoon, and would find that on top of their bed. And they would come down all upset and accuse us of going up and putting these things there and planting them. And she says, I swear to you, says, we haven't done anything. Tenant says, that's crazy. I'm like, what's going on? Is there a ghost here? Is there someone hiding in this house that we don't know about? Like, have you checked everywhere? And she says, no, my husband, we've checked everything, and we've gone in the attic. We've made sure there's no openings anywhere. I mean, all the locks were changed, and, we kept our windows locked and closed. But, there was one time where we didn't have any tenants here in the house, and, we have a young boy, and his bedroom used to be up there, and we'd hear these strange noises, like, like scratching noises, or like somebody moving around up there. And, my husband would go up there and he'd look around. Of course, everything stopped. You couldn't hear anything. But a lot of times the boy would wake up crying and screaming, so we figured he was having nightmares. So we decided that he was going to sleep in our room for a little while, so we put his crib in there. So the tenant's listening to all this, and she's thinking, maybe should we bring someone in here? Should we bring someone in to clean this place of whatever negative energies here? So the landlady said, we've done that before. We brought a priest in here. We brought this one lady in here, and things seem to quiet down for a little while, but it looks like they're starting to ramp up again with you. She says, I have an idea. Why don't we take the roses away and we'll put them somewhere else? She goes, why don't you give me the roses? Now you've got 11 now, so you've got a damaged one. So give me the 11 roses. She goes, I'll put it in a vase and I'll put it somewhere else here in the house, and let's see what happens. So the tenant went upstairs and grabbed the vase. She goes, you can keep the vase, just, keep the whole thing. And they both were, thinking where to put it. So the wife says, you know what? Why don't I put it in my bedroom? I'll leave the vase there. Sure, no problem. A couple of days went by, nothing happened. On a Friday night, the tenants decided to go out and visit someone. So they were out for the evening. The landlords decided, you know what, let's just go out for a walk, or, let's go for an ice cream, let's just do something. They came back about maybe an hour and a half later. The tenants still hadn't arrived home. As soon as they opened the door and turned the light on in the foyer, there's all the roses scattered all over the floor, petals torn off, stems cut, thorns everywhere, all scattered along the hallway. She started to freak out and didn't want to walk into the house, so she closed the door. So she sat outside with her husband and her son and said, let's just wait till our tenants come back. So about an hour or so later, the tenants arrived and saw them sitting on the porch there. And they were about to, walk by them to put the key in the door and walk in. And the lady says, you don't want to go in there. She goes, you're never going to believe what happened. She goes, we went out just for a walk and to get some ice cream and just get some fresh air. And when we came back, she goes, this is what we saw. And she opened the door, turned the light on, and all the flower petals were all torn, like I described earlier, scattered all over the foyer. And they both freaked out and thought, oh my God, what the heck? She says, nobody's home. But somebody did this. It's got to be somebody human in this house. It can't be something else. So they all entered the house, got a couple of dustpans and the brooms, started sweeping up and cleaning up, tossed the roses in the garbage. They started talking, and the tenant asked her and said, the lady that gave me these roses, the one that lives just down that way there, how well do you know her? Like, I know her a little bit, like just as an acquaintance. And she said, which lady gave you the roses? And she said, oh, the lady with the long brown hair and the glasses, the one that lives in that house. Because she's always got her blinds closed and never opens them and whatnot. And the landlord looked at her husband and said, do you know who that is? She goes, no. She goes, that lady, no one really talks to her. I mean, very little conversation. She's always locked in the house. She very rarely comes out. The blinds and curtains are always closed. No one's ever been to her house. There's a lot of speculation about what goes on in there. But again, just speculation. But there's something very strange. Very, very strange. She lived by herself. I believe she had never been married, no children. So they decided the next day that they were going to go over and knock on the door and have a little chat with her. So next day comes, All four of them march across the street, knock on the door. No one opens the door. And suddenly in the window you could see the curtain move just slightly, and you saw someone peek out and the curtain closed again all of a sudden. So they knocked harder, and the voice on the other end said, "Go away." And I said, "Hey, look, we just want to talk to you. We have a couple of questions." And she kept yelling, "Go away." So they all left the porch, walked back across the street. They were sitting on their porch there and talking and just going, why is she being this way? Like, why? Open the door. I mean, you don't have to let us in. We could talk on the porch there, but what is going on? And one day, when the tenant comes home from work, she checks her mailbox outside, and there's a rose in the mailbox. So she starts looking around to see if anybody's watching her. And of course she can't tell, right? But she looks over to the house across the street, and she could see someone standing near the blinds. And you could see the curtain slightly moving to the side. She was wondering perhaps if it was the lady across the street that put that in the mailbox. But again, she couldn't prove it. So she took the rose, snapped the stem in half and threw it on the ground and went inside. She told her husband about it after, told the landlady. So things got very weird for a little while. That lady didn't come out. And they used to see the curtain move slightly in the house, and they said they saw someone peeking. Here's a real strange thing. One of the other neighbors said to them, so-and-so lived across the street. And they said, yeah. I said, we tried to talk to her for a while, but got some questions for her, but, she's not opening the door. He said, she passed away 6 months ago.